All right, I just did part one of what I think needs to be a two-part video, which is last one was Powerless, part one. And now I'm going to do part two, which is like, okay, so the worst thing has happened. Regionally, you have no electrical power. And now what do you do? So in part one, I talked about the Hollywood scenarios like EMPs, CMEs, hackers, very dramatic, great drama opportunities, people struggling against adversity, and so on. And then I detailed how it probably will happen. Yeah, sure, you could have a nuclear war and have an EMP. Yeah, maybe. You could have a CME like the Carrington event, although that was a pretty rare event, so maybe not. Hackers, yeah, maybe, but would it be a big deal? Maybe you could restart things after the hackers have been ejected from the system, and so on. But the real problem is that we lose civilization. And we only have an electrical grid if we have an army of utility workers and designers and manufacturers and all the other things, power plant operators, nuclear power plant operators, who are willing to continue to do what they do every single day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in the face of societal civilizational collapse. And my guess is they won't be. I mean, they'll maybe tough it out for a few days or maybe even a few weeks. But at some point, their families are going to be terrified. They're going to want to escape. They're going to want to get away, wherever that is. You know, the rural and the urban doesn't have much of a difference here because it's the workers. It's not whether you live in the country and so you're not too worried about the zombie apocalypse, or you live in the city and it's a big problem. That's not really the dichotomy here. These are centralized resources. Electrical generation and distribution is a centralized resource. Everybody ends up in the same situation. No power. Powerless. Probably forever. Why forever? Because it takes 100 years to stand up these systems. It takes weeks and months to repair them. Months, maybe years to repair them after a major collapse. And who's going to do it? We got here over 100 years. Can we repeat that? Or even any part of that? What if it takes 10 years to repair these systems and get them working again? Who's going to do that? You just had a civilizational collapse. That's a collapse in manufacturing, education, repair parts for the systems that need to be repaired. Vehicle maintenance for all the workers have to go out and go to these sites and get the power plants working again and get the transmission lines back working again and fix all the poles that were knocked down and everything else. And are they going to do it? Maybe, maybe not. You could be without power for all time, virtually. But there is an option. And it isn't that we should anticipate how to maintain this massive, global, large-scale utility grid, electrical grid, that we built over 100 years. That's managed centrally, that's built centrally, that's got SCADA systems for remote operations, it has all these thousands of highly trained workers. You can actually do this yourself. And in the events of a societal collapse, you're going to have to. So I'm going to talk about that now. How do you have your own electricity? I want to say also that one of the themes in my book, it was 100 days, link in the description. One of the themes is that people who survive a collapse, a large-scale global collapse of civilization, are basically the people who decide to work together, and I call this village life. And in the book, they start out realizing that they're in trouble, that they're going to have to pull together, that they can pull together, that they have the right amount of resources, and they decide they're going to form a village, put up walls, and try and survive this thing as best they can. Their hope of surviving it is not that great, but it turns out they did the right thing. Wouldn't be much of a book if they didn't do the right thing. And I happen to think that it would be the right thing, and that people who survive a large-scale collapse of global civilization will be the people who can form groups, functional groups, can gather resources, share the resources, and also who can create their own electricity. Because that's, I think, key. And you can do it. So in the book, how does it happen? One of the neighbors has an existing solar installation. So this is going to sound very hippy-dippy, but I don't care. You deal with it as best you can. Somebody has a sophisticated solar installation, a lot of panels, big inverters, running their whole house, basically, plus the garage, plus the whatever else, off of solar panel and a battery array. So that's what we call off-grid solar. And I'll talk about the different forms of solar, and you may have something like this going on, and you need to know whether you're in good shape or not. You may have a neighbor who has some of this going on. You need to know in advance if they are going to be a provider or not. And the short answer is they won't be. But let me explain why that is and how you can address that. So, why is it important to have electricity in the case of civilizational collapse? Well, it's modernity. You can't have gasoline because the service stations will be closed because they have no power and no one's delivering gasoline anymore. So you can't have gasoline, you can't have diesel, you can't have medications delivered to your local chemist, you can't have food deliveries to your local markets. There's a lot of things you can't have, but believe it or not, you can have your own electricity. What does it take to have your own electricity? So let me describe that. We're all familiar with solar panels, and the purpose of a solar panel is to collect sunlight during the day, convert that sunlight into electricity using what's called the photoelectric effect, which was hypothesized first by Albert Einstein, believe it or not. I think that's actually the thing. Yes, that's the thing that got him the Nobel Prize in physics. It wasn't all that relativity stuff that he did. That came later. He got his Nobel Prize in physics for discovering the photoelectric effect. And it turns out it's actually really important because that's how solar panels work. So, solar panels, when properly installed, of course, by someone who knows what they're doing, I'll get to that in a minute, they can collect sunlight, convert it into electricity, and then you can do something with the electricity. The electricity that comes out of a solar panel is what we call DC, or direct current. It's the same electricity, different voltage, of course, that you get out of a battery. You use batteries, you put them in your flashlight, you put them in your battery-operated toys and things like that. A battery has a plus and a minus end. If you put it in the wrong way, it doesn't work, and this way it does. It's direct current. It only goes in one direction. So we've all worked with batteries. It has a polarity and has to go in the right way. Well, solar panels are just solar batteries. They have a plus and a minus side. They create DC, direct current, and you have to put them in the right way around or they won't work together. And your house doesn't run on DC. Now you can charge, say, lead-acid batteries off of a DC solar panel. And if you go to one of your local do-it-yourself stores, probably not Home Depot or Lowe's, but like Harbor Freight, they'll sell you a little kit. It has like one solar panel, and it's got some clips or something, and you can charge a battery with it. And what would you use that for? You'd use it for camping, or maybe for a remote cabin, where you're going to use that 12-volt battery to run some simple 12-volt lights. Recreational vehicles and automobiles have 12-volt lighting systems. So if you have a 12-volt battery and you have a solar panel that can charge the 12-volt battery, keep it charged up, then you can have a 12-volt light, just like you do in an RV or in your car. And it can be, it's enough to read by. It's enough to see inside your house. You're not stumbling around in the dark. Your cabin, or your tent, whatever. And you can buy these things on Amazon. There's also a thing called, and I don't know why they do this, I don't know how they get away with this, called a solar generator, which sounds really important. It's just a battery. You can hook it up to a solar panel, and if you have sunlight, you have a solar panel, then you can charge your solar generator. But it's just a battery. It's just a big lithium-ion battery. And you have to charge it with something. Most people charge it at home by plugging it into the wall. That's all DC. Now, your solar generator, so-called, Has nothing to do with the sun. So-called, marketed as solar generator. It might have something called an inverter. Now, the inverter, it's a clever name, but what it does is it converts DC current, which isn't real useful except for charging your cell phone or something, and converts it into AC, or alternating current. Alternating current is what's in your house, in the walls. Okay, your household lighting is alternating current, AC. Your computer, ironically enough, internally it's DC, but it plugs into the wall to get AC. All your kitchen appliances are AC appliances, and so forth. Oh, and by the way, you can buy DC appliances. You have to get them at very specific suppliers. So if you have a source of direct current electricity, you could run specific types of appliances that only run on DC. But most of us aren't going to do that. We already have our AC appliances, and so if you have a source of DC power, including a solar panel and or a battery, which are all DC, all direct current, then you need an inverter to convert that into useful alternating current, or AC. So that's the technology chain. DC solar panels that use the photoelectric effect to turn light into electricity, DC electricity, that then can be used to charge a battery, that can then be used, if you have an inverter, to create AC electricity for charging your laptop computer, charging your cell phone, running your AC appliances if they're not very big, and so on. Now, like I said, you can go to Harbor Freight or someplace like that, or I'm in Amazon, and you get a really small solar charge system that might be good for a cabin, might be good for a campsite, might have a little bit of electricity, might be able to store some, might have a small inverter for powering a charging device or charge your laptop computer. And the $200, $300, $500 sounds like a great idea. That's not going to get you very far in a collapse of civilization where the grid that's currently powering your house falls apart. You're going to need AC power to the house. One solar power panel absolutely will not do that. The amount of voltage and amperage you get out of a single solar panel is ridiculously small. It's tiny. A typical useful amount of solar energy is when you take 3 or 4 panels. Remember, each panel is like a battery. 3 or 4 panels, and you string them together, plus to minus to plus to minus to plus to minus. And then the voltages are additive. So if each panel puts out 75 volts at 10 amps, which is not atypical, then if you strung 4 of them together, you'd have 75 volts at 40 amps. And 40 amps is useful amount of electricity. Then you have to have what's called a charge controller, that the 4 panels don't just hook up to a battery with clips. They hook up to a charge controller, and the charge controller takes the output of the DC panels, and sometimes it's high, sometimes it's low, but it manages it. And the charge controller is what charges the battery. Otherwise, your solar panels could provide the wrong type of current and voltage and blow the battery up. For example, if the panels are generating 75 volts and 40 amps, 40 amps is fine for charging a battery, but 75 volts will blow it up. It's a 12 volt battery. So the charge controller will take the 75 volts, ratchet it down to 12 volts, or probably more like 15, and they get more amps too. And then it'll pour that high amperage, low voltage supply into a 12 volt battery. You can use 12 volt batteries, 24 volt batteries. I've got my off-grid system has 54 volt batteries, which is typical for residential solar. I got a bunch of them. What have I got? 5, 8. I got 8 big 100 amp hour batteries. They're lithium ion batteries. Not lithium ion. Actually, they're lithium iron phosphate, which is what you're supposed to use for solar power. Lithium iron phosphate. So that's the string. You have and if you have a lot of these strings. I call them strings. They're like arrays. They're like my strings, because my panels are pretty high voltage and high amperage. I have 3 panels to a string, and they're all sitting next to each other. They're all wired together, and then one wire, well, 2 wires, plus and minus. Again, they're DC. Plus and minus goes all the way back to the charge controller, and all the wires from all the different panels, strings, come together into one wire that goes into the charge controller. And so whichever strings are getting the most sunlight, then they are feeding the charge controller. And to the charge controller, all the different strings, and I have 4 on the garage and 4 on the house and 2 somewhere else. And so, but it all looks like one big array. When all those wires come into the charge controller as a single wire, they look like one big battery. And then the charge controller uses that to charge a battery. And I have 7 big lithium batteries. They're so big you can't pick them up. You have to use them with equipment. So I've got 7 of these big industrial batteries. And it takes all the power I can generate to keep them charged up. But when they're fully charged, there's a lot of power in there. So that's all the DC side. That's the power collection side. You've got, again, just to repeat, I'm giving this example because people don't understand how this stuff works. It's all magic. Well, it's not magic. It's technology. Okay, you have to know what the technology parts are. And then you make your own electricity. This is really kind of cool. All these strings of solar panels go into a charge controller that conditions the incoming voltage to be the right voltage at the right amperage to charge these big industrial batteries. Then you want to use that storage. You want to use that stored electrons, and that's where you have an inverter. I have 2 big dual radian inverters. So I've got 4 inverters. 2 of them are in the main. They're paired together. They work in sequence. 2 of them are in the main inverter, and 2 of them are in the secondary. And I can have up to 10 total. So 1 main and 9 secondaries. I've only got 1 secondary. I could add to that. I might even want to do that at some point. 4 inverters. I think, as I recall, they're doing 8 kilowatts each. 8,000 watts. I end up with something like 32 kilowatts total between all 4 inverters. And all of this just goes into the house. It's sine wave electricity, just like it's coming from the utility. It's high power. You have to use big wires to connect these inverters up to the house. And then the house is off-grid. It has no permanent connection to the utility grid. It's off-grid. So I run on solar power through a charge controller into a big battery array to which I attach 4 inverters, and those in turn are attached to the house. So I have a completely self-contained power generation, management, and dispersal system for my property. My property is off-grid. The grid is still available. I use it for backup. We've been having really cloudy days here in California. It's been kind of wretched, to be honest. We just have one storm after another. It's very strange, not familiar at all. And while the sun is behind clouds and there's not enough to really drive the system, then I buy power from the grid to run the property. And when the sun comes out, I don't buy power. And when the sun goes behind the clouds, I have to buy power. And this is completely transparent to me. I never notice when it makes that decision. It just makes a decision, and then it changes its mind, if you would, and it goes back and forth as needed, and I never hear about it. I know what it's doing, but I don't have to worry about it. So that's kind of what I've just described is kind of an optimal system. And the reason why it's optimal is because, for the current discussion, is because I have full 240 volt split phase, 240 volt AC power from the sun. No compromises. I have storage and I have a backup. No compromises. If the grid goes down, my system doesn't even know that. Well, it can tell me when the grid is attached and when the grid is not. So if the grid goes down, the system will say, oh, by the way, the utility is gone. So it's just you and your batteries. I'll say, okay, that's fine. My batteries are charged up. I don't care. But if the grid goes down, my system notices that, and it basically says your backup is gone. Good to know. But it's just a backup. Now, there's another way to do solar, which is what most people do. The system I have is extremely elaborate. It's very built up. It's kind of insane. I manage it just fine. I'm an electrical engineer. I'm good at this. Most people have, when they install solar panels on their home, and maybe they have a charge controller for the electric vehicle in the garage, or maybe some other things. What they have is a grid tie system. Their solar panels don't have batteries or a charge controller. Their DC from the panels goes right into an inverter, and it powers their house. And the inverter powers their charging system for their car. It's like any other household electric. But they're also on the grid all the time. Not as a backup, constantly on the grid. Now, people like that arrangement because if your solar panels are not collecting any power, then the grid is always there. And it just uses the grid. So you don't have to buy batteries, and you don't have to have charge controllers for the batteries, and you don't have to worry about battery storage or how many batteries you have, or is it going to work for you or not. But the problem with grid tie, well, okay, the other thing the grid tie does is allows you to sell electricity back to the utility company. So it's called, the term for it is net metering. So if you buy electricity for half the day, say at night, because there's no solar. So by definition, you're buying electricity at night. But then the sun comes out during the day and you create more electricity than you really need. You sell it back to the company. So net of net, in theory, you might not pay for electricity at all. You buy it at night, you sell it during the day, and net of net, your net metering sort of balances the bill. And then maybe at the end of the month, you still get a bill for what little bit was not balanced out, and you pay that, and you didn't have to pay a full bill that maybe your neighbors on either side of you had to pay because they don't have solar power that's grid attached. That sounds pretty good, and a lot of people like that. Batteries are expensive. People, charge controllers cost a lot of money. And do you need to be off grid? Well, maybe not. Who cares, right? I'll buy at nighttime, and then I'll sell back during the day, and it'll all net out, and maybe I won't pay anything at the end of the month. But the problem with that is, when the utility goes down, as happens, occasionally, then your solar power system goes offline. There's no AC. There can still be DC because the sun may still be out. It's not that the sun goes away. You still have DC power, but because you are tied to the grid, it's a grid tie system and you have no batteries. When the grid goes down, your on-site inverter also goes down. You can't buy electricity from the grid because it's gone, and you can't sell electricity to the grid because it's gone. And in fact, it's really unsafe. It's considered it's maladapted for you to be pumping electricity into the grid when there's no grid. Some utility worker is going to come along and try to work on that pole, and they've already decided that the SCADA system has shut the power down, there's no power. But when they get up on that pole and they put their tester on, there's power. Why? Because someone up and down the street is energizing the wires from their house, from their solar equipment. So all this equipment is now engineered so that when the grid goes down, your grid goes down. That's the downside of grid attached solar. It's nice, it's cheaper because you're not buying batteries, you're not buying charge controllers, you're not storing batteries, you're not dealing with battery maintenance, but you're vulnerable to the grid going down. When the grid goes down, you go down. That's how it's supposed to work, and that's how it does work. Now, in the case of a civilizational disaster, yes, you could take your house off the grid, and then you're not energizing the lines, you're just energizing your home. But your inverter probably won't work that way. If there isn't power from the grid, it may not even light up. It may simply say, too bad, I am not going to provide power because you're grid attached, and if I do that, someone's going to get hurt. Maybe there's a setting. I doubt it. I don't think these systems are allowed to have settings where, yes, ignore the grid, pretend that you're off the grid, and we're just going to have electricity all day long while the sun is up. They don't work that way. The advantage of being off-grid is it doesn't matter what the grid is doing or not doing. I use it as a backup, but I don't have to use it at all because I have batteries. And when the grid goes down, I'm running on the batteries anyway. I may not even know the grid went down. It's immaterial to me that the grid went down. I do not sell electricity to the grid because if I did, they could take my system down when the grid failed. I use the grid as a backup. And when my system isn't generating power because it's nighttime or it's been cloudy, then I can use the grid as a backup because I'm still attached to it, but I never sell back to them. And they can't shut my system down when they fail. And this has actually happened. In the last video, I mentioned that the pole right across the street had a massive blow-up equipment failure. And all the buildings and residential housing all around us went down. We did not. And we had our light on. It was dark. It was about this time of day. It was dark, and we had our light on in the front, and I heard this big bang and all this sparking and lightning and all this carrying on. And so I went out on my front porch to say, what the heck is all that? And we still had power because all we lost was our backup, and we didn't need a backup. It was in the summer. Our batteries were full. So a fully off-grid system is an island of functionality, and it will stay that way, especially if you're not doing grid-attached net metering, which I'm not. I have no interaction with the public utility except to buy power when I don't make my own. I just buy power like everybody else does. And that's my only relationship with them. And I get a bill and all this other stuff, but I'm off-grid except as a backup. That's expensive. There's a lot of engineering involved, a lot more equipment, the whole thing. But it works. So in the event of and this is why I do this, in the event of a massive interruption of the utility grid, electric grid, then I kind of don't have to worry about that. So in Powerless Part 2, I want to talk about how you could have power and how you could provide power to your neighbors, because you could. Now, this series is called Massive Societal Change, and that's what I'm talking about here. This is a massive change. It's in the book. I nerd out for page after page in the book about how you do this, how you become what's called, I think it's called a microgrid. There's actually a term for it, that a community goes off grid, and they are generating and sharing their own electricity among themselves. So if you want to know how that happens, you can buy the book and read those relevant chapters, because I go into it in great detail. And from the discussion I just provided, that discussion will make a lot more sense. You can build an off-grid system. You can build a local utility, a distributed grid, like among 20, 40 houses, right? You could do that if you had enough panels, enough batteries, and enough inverters. You could provide electricity for a whole community. And maybe you're not running the dryer all the time, and maybe you're not running expensive or high-powered equipment all the time, but you could have lights inside. You could be able to run some appliances, some of your AC appliances, blender, right? Maybe a refrigerator. Maybe you could run a refrigerator. And maybe you only run it when the sun is out, but you can still run a refrigerator if you needed to or had to. And between things like lighting, electric water heaters, refrigerators, you kind of feel like you kind of got it together. Now, this is completely conceivable. There's nothing science fiction about anything I just said. Nothing. I mean, I'm set up to do it. That's why I wrote the book, right? I know how to do this. And in the book, we do this because I know how to do this. And in the book, I share how I do this. So if you read the book and you watch this video, you'll know how I do this. This is not science fiction. I have enough inverters. I've got four 4-kilowatt inverters. And 4 kilowatts is a lot of power. Your computer maybe pulls a third of a kilowatt, 1/3. And if you have things like LED lights, they don't pull any power whatsoever. It's not even measurable. My electric water heater is a heat pump water heater. It's like a $5,000 unit. Bosch or something like that. Bosch, I think. Yeah. Uses a heat pump to heat water. And you can't even tell when it's running. It pulls so little power. You can't even tell when it's running. We have a Miele laundry set. Washer and dryer. The washer plugs into a regular AC outlet, just like any other appliance. The washer needs water, of course. And the dryer also plugs into a regular AC outlet. It pulls so little power, it doesn't even need 220 or anything else. You can run that thing all day and never even notice how much power it takes. It's a heat pump-based dryer. Heat pumps are amazing, and it does an amazing job of drying the clothes. No compromises of any kind. Of course, the whole system, both units combined, high efficiency heat pumps, very low current draw, the whole thing probably costs $5,200. No, I'm not going to pay that. Well, listen, folks. Listen to me. We're talking about massive societal change. All right? Yes, I know. No one wants to spend $5,200 for a washer and dryer pair just because it's extremely low power. Yeah, you just might want to do that. Batteries are a big deal with me. I got a lot of batteries and I can run 220 if I want to, but man, it sucks down the power. And I hate it when that happens. So for me, since batteries are really expensive, and when they run down, you're doing without, you're buying electricity from the power company if they're there. Since all that is real and all that is true, I spend extra money on buying appliances that use as little electricity as possible. So I have a heat pump water heater, spend a lot of money on it. Actually, we got a rebate too from the city or the utility company. We got a partial rebate. They love it when you buy energy efficient things. And then we bought the Miele Twin DOS heat pump powered laundry pair. And no compromise. Works like a charm. Works like a champ. And sucks so little power, you don't even need 220. So can you do this? Absolutely, you can do this. Will people do this? Absolutely. In the case of a massive societal collapse of civilization and supply chains and eventually the electrical grid, because, people panic, they run away from their work, and they take their family and they head for the hills or whatever people do when they panic, then it's going to be you. Just you all by yourself. And are you powered or not? And, if people run out of electricity, the grid goes down, whatever, and they can't light their house and they don't have hot water, whatever. Maybe they're using natural gas for hot water, but eventually, if things get bad enough, then even your natural gas is going to get shut down because the people who manage the natural gas, another utility company, they're going to go home. When they go home, are they just going to leave the gas in the pipelines and all the pumps pumping the gas and all the controls and all the SCADA? They're just going to walk away from all that and leave that hot? Maybe not. They may say, well, this is not safe for us anymore. We're leaving, and we're going to turn off the natural gas. Now, you can't generate your own natural gas at home. You can generate your own electricity. And that's the way you want to go. So here in Powerless Part 2, I'm talking about how you're not powerless. You have electricity. You can't have natural gas. You can't have gasoline. You can't have a lot of other things, but you can have electricity. It's just not what you think. And it's probably not what you or your neighbor has, which is grid attached, no batteries, no charge controllers. Yeah, it works a little bit, but it's not going to survive. And if you have medical equipment at home, if you really need refrigeration for medications or whatever, then you're going to have to be off grid. Yeah, at least to some extent. And it's a big deal. It's not easy to set these things up. You'll want professional help. And once you've got it, then you've got something. I could say more about this. Not going to. I think I've made my point. I wanted to talk about off-grid solar and why you might want to have it. And again, it's in the book. Link in the description. And if you want to nerd out over this and get an idea how it works, that's where you'd have to go. All right. So that's all I'm going to say on this topic. This is a fun topic for me. I like talking about these things. And if nothing else, gets you thinking about what you might have to do or what society will have to do to not be powerless.